Israel is expanding its operation against Hezbollah, pushing further into Lebanon despite a ceasefire deal between the two sides. During what was one of the heaviest nights of bombardment since a US-brokered ceasefire began in mid-April, Lebanon's health ministry says 31 people were killed by Israeli strikes on Tuesday, including 11 people in the Bekaa Valley village of Mashgara, from where our correspondent John Sudworth reports.
Rescue crews are digging frantically as a tiny arm pokes through the rubble. Caked in dirt and dust, 7-year-old Mohammed is eventually pulled to safety. This is the pilot's eye view of one of the strikes on Mashgara. Israel says it's not targeting civilians in places like this, but the infrastructure and fighters of Hezbollah. And this is the result on the ground. The war reignited 3 months ago after Hezbollah, in a defiant show of support for its patron Iran, fired rockets across Israel's border. As we speak to a village official, we hear an Israeli drone circling overhead. He insists these were civilian targets, and although he says he's not a member of Hezbollah, he says he does support their cause, before we're interrupted by the sound of incoming jets. Social media videos show a large explosion on a road not far from where we're filming. So while we're talking to this man, we can hear the drone up ahead and we can hear strikes coming in. In fact, they're telling there's a warning, so we've got to get out of here. Mohammed, the boy pulled from the rubble, is now recovering in hospital. He's not yet been told that his father and 2 sisters were killed in the strike, and he's in remarkably good spirits. And here's a really difficult question, Mohammed. Who do you think did this to you?
An Israeli.
And do you know why the Israelis are attacking Lebanon?
تعرف ليش عم يعملوا هيك الإسرائيلية؟ ليش؟ أنا نهبل.
He said, yes, I know why. He said, why? He said, because they're stupid.
A 7-year-old making light of war in a country all too used to it. But the human cost is mounting and there are real fears it could yet get much worse. John Sudworth, BBC News, Mashgara in eastern Lebanon.
Let's speak to our Middle East correspondent, Lina Sinjab, who's in Beirut. And Lina, how would you describe the situation in Lebanon after these bruising strikes?
Well, it's far from a ceasefire situation, especially when you're talking about the south. You know, airstrikes are on a daily basis. Even the early hours of this morning, on an Eid day, today marks the first day of Eid al-Adha, a 4-day celebration for Muslims in Lebanon and across the Arab world. But even that holy, feast was not spared the airstrikes by the Israelis. Hezbollah is also saying that they are, retaliating with attacks on Israeli soldiers in the south of Lebanon and in the north of Israel. But the announcement coming from the Israeli Prime Minister and from Israeli officials is really keeping the country on edge, especially here in Beirut, the capital. People are worried about a strike that could hit the capital, especially in the south part of the of Beirut, where Al-Dahya neighborhood, a Hezbollah stronghold, that witnessed waves of evacuation, voluntary evacuation by people fearing for their safety, while orders of evacuations from villages and towns across the borderline in the south continue almost on a daily basis.
Lina, Israel talks a lot about the attacks from Hezbollah as provocative. What is the relationship like between Hezbollah and the Lebanese government?
There is a clear tension from day one since this war started, when Hezbollah launched rockets on the 2nd of March into Israel. The government immediately condemned and ordered the end of any military or security operation by Hezbollah. But since that day, it was clear that Hezbollah is following orders by the Iranians, and the government is paralyzed and not able to stop the group from, hostile activities against Israel that for many, including the government, dragged the whole country into war. But, with weeks into this war and the level of destruction and the death toll and the occupation with boots on the ground from the Israelis in the south of Lebanon, many people, including from Hezbollah's community, are supporting the group because they feel they are the only ones fighting for them.
Lina, for now, thank you very much. Lina Sinjab live from Beirut there. Well, one wonders what effect this will have on the ongoing negotiations between Iran and the US. And Iran has accused the US of committing a gross violation of the ceasefire between the two countries. Tehran says it has the right to retaliate after the American military carried out what it called self-defense strikes on southern Iran. Well, our international editor Jeremy Bowen says given the positive noises surrounding negotiations and the US resuming strikes on Iran, people watching the war could be forgiven for being confused.
Some of that confusion has once again been sown by Donald Trump, who oscillates between saying different things. He's often sounded optimistic in the past. He did also at the weekend, and now these strikes have happened. I think the thing is at the moment, through intermediaries, they're trying to work out essentially an agenda, a memorandum of understanding for more deep-seated talks on those big issues, which will actually be deferred as a result of all of this if they can get to talk about them. What we're seeing is a sign, I think, of the fragility of the process, the difficulty that Donald Trump has of backing out of this mess that he has actually put America in and its allies as well, and the Iranians being prepared to wait him out. And I think that what we're seeing is not just the consequences of his decision on the 28th of February to go to war. It's also the decision that he made in his first term to just throw out the earlier 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the so-called JCPOA, which was not a perfect deal, but Iran was in compliance, and it was a way of constraining Iran's nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. And he said it was a terrible deal, the worst ever. Netanyahu agreed with him, and they came to the conclusion that the only way ahead was military action to constrain the Iranians. And that, in a sense, put them on the road to where they are now. So there will be some kind of an arrangement or a deal sooner or later, presumably, to try to end all this. If the Iranian regime ends up in a stronger position, perhaps through sanctions relief, perhaps because they have survived this onslaught, the regime is still there, there has not been regime change, perhaps because the Americans can no longer say, if you don't behave, we're going to bomb you. Well, they bombed them and they're still there. So if they come out of all of this stronger than they were when Donald Trump went to war on the 28th, then America will have suffered a serious strategic defeat, which will impact its position, not just in the Middle East, but globally. It's that serious for the Americans. Of course, the rest of us, we're hoping that the Strait of Hormuz might open up so things like petrol get a little bit cheaper.
Well, while the focus is there on what's going on in Iran, Israel has carried out a pair of airstrikes in Gaza City, killing at least 3 people and injuring 12, according to local medics. One strike targeting a residential building in one of Gaza City's busiest market areas, where streets were packed with shoppers ahead of the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha. Earlier, Israel said its military had targeted Hamas's armed wing commander, Mohammed Odeh, days after his predecessor was killed in a similar attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has described Mohammed Odeh as one of the architects of Hamas's October the 7th attacks. Israeli media says he's believed to have been killed. A ceasefire agreed in October has been repeatedly violated by Israel and is failing to progress to the next phase, with Hamas refusing to disarm.